watched as complacency replaced discipline. We sat on the sidelines as clickbait replaced our history. And we kept silent as our skill sets and careers became automated, antiquated, routine, and forgotten. This is unacceptable. We're here to guide you towards putting down your number and reclaiming your given name. We're here to guide you towards your vision of freedom. The world has changed, and there's no more room for willful ignorance. So to those happy with being stuck, with being complacent, this podcast's not for you. But to those looking for more, follow us as we reclaim it all. For our children, for our grandchildren, and for future generations to come.
From somewhere deep undercover in the Pacific Northwest, this is the American Reveille Podcast, and here is your host, James Lane.
Oh my, oh my, oh my. Sorry guys, I'm still enjoying the sound of my own voice in the headphones. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. I am James Lane. This is the American Reveille Podcast, and this is the one podcast that even if you hit snooze on it a few times, it still somehow miraculously goes off until you get so irritated you get out of bed anyway. I also think we probably have the most dramatic introduction in all of podcasting. You're welcome for that. Anyway, this is your wake-up call. Yes, it is. It is time for us to stop acting like amateurs at life and start acting like professionals. So it's time for the ones among us who already are doing this stuff to help others step up into the same roles of responsibilities and ownership as well. It's time to bring big mentorship back and communities together. So the government's not going to keep the American spirit operating on high octane. The American spirit lives in the American people. So you have to remember that it's up to us. This is all good stuff that we're trying to promote here, but it's on our backs to bust our ass and make this place better and make it a better place for our friends, our family, our kids, our grandkids, the future. And that's what this is all about. So look, sometimes I'm vulgar and sometimes I try to be a little humorous and I try to keep you guys interested and entertained. But at the end of the day, I want to bring you guys something real, something relatable, something attainable, something of value. I want to build that trust with you. And so I'm going to give you a secret to luck, something I found that really helps generate the stuff. And it's going to start like some of these podcasts have started the last few times with some old stories. So I don't tell many people this story because this one's a little embarrassing, and it's actually one of my first failures when I started really trying to be something when I was a lot younger. And, it's almost kind of like watching a movie, when I think back on being in these situations, it's kind of like watching somebody else's life. That's something I want you to remember. Life is experienced almost in slices. And as you get older, as we go through this, I'm sure a lot of you understand this by now and relate. But for the ones who don't, you look back on things and it's really surreal. It's almost like looking back at a slice of time. So back to what I was trying to say. Once upon a time, I was going to try to be a firefighter. That's what I wanted to do. And I mean, it may have been because there was a cool bouncer that I was working with at a bar, and he was a firefighter, and that was what he was moonlighting as a bouncer. So after talking to him, maybe that's why, but I figured out how to apply, and I went for it. So I got myself into the fire academy many years ago, and I actually remember wanting to be a firefighter, and one of the prerequisites was that you had to be an EMT, so to get actually hired by a fire department. So I went to EMT school, and I did pretty good, but I never really went beyond that. And I remember actually how embarrassed I was when I was doing a ride time. And for those of you who don't know, a part of a lot of different medical training and EMT training for sure, there's a thing where you do ride times and you'll either like work in a hospital or you'll be on the back of an ambulance, or fire truck. And, I worked with a lot of firefighters when I was doing those ride times, and they actually liked me because I made good pasta. But still, I kind of was ashamed because there was a point where somebody was on the beach and they needed help. And I pretty much winged my school. I realized at that point that I hadn't put any heart and soul into it because I had no idea what a triangle bandage was when they were asking for it. So we had this guy with a busted arm on the beach, and somebody else had to do my job because I couldn't help that person. And, I really had no clue what I was doing. And I honestly, at that point, didn't even have a clue what discipline was yet. And a lot of us have stories like that. I remember a few things from the fire academy. I remember one thing is that I know for sure I'm not built for running. I'm made for lifting. I'm made for moving heavy objects. It's amazing I even got through Navy boot camp. If it was a different boot camp, I might not have gotten through it. But another thing is that I was most likely very unlikable. And that's something that takes a lot of reflection later in life. Remembering 18 or 19-year-old me stings. It stings as I remember the things that once came out of my mouth, as I'm sure it does for a lot of you. I failed out of the fire academy. I'm going to say that again. I failed out of the fire academy near the end. And I just didn't know how to focus. I didn't know how to beat back the resistance, again, for any Pressfield fans out there. So I failed out near the end, and not right away. It took a few years, but looking back, I ended up learning a few valuable things from that. And they ended up coming back and saving me later, like we talked about a few podcasts ago. Isn't that funny, by the way? How sometimes in life we feel like we're going nowhere, and even like we're going backwards, but then you find out later that if you really hadn't done so, you wouldn't be mentally equipped to handle something much worse. I mean, I remember something like that. This is one of those things. I vividly remember a class in the fire academy where the instructor, and I've forgotten his name by now, it's been years, he was talking about a concept called a BLEVE. So that's BLEVE. BLEVE. So that stands for a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. Ooh. So imagine this. You're on the freeway and a fuel tanker's flipped over. It's on fire and the heat begins to boil the pressurized fluid inside, and that boiling causes the vapors to heat up and expand. So what happens when you microwave a Tupperware full of spaghetti too long with the lid on? Sauce all over the microwave. And in this case, it's kaboom, death, and fire and metal all over the place. So what's this have to do with anything? In order to not lose sight of the operation, overlook something that could cause something like a BLEVE, the instructor taught a method that everyone was pretty fairly acquainted with, but I wasn't at the time. But it had been around for many years, and I talked about it in the last podcast. But the 6 Ps, proper planning, prevents piss poor performance. There's a nicer way to say it. I prefer the way that this instructor explained it to us. So this means that you don't just figure out where you're going, and you don't just figure out the stops you need to take on the freeway to where you're trying to go, but also that you think about, figure out, and plan out how you're going to tackle each individual step or obstacle. So this sounds overwhelming, but literally it's the process of strategic thinking and decision making. And because you end up with an actual game plan in the long run, it simplifies things for you. Imagine that, something that seems complicated, but actually ends up being simple. So this brings up something very important, though, the word long run. So you ever hear that old saying, nothing in this life worth having comes easy? Well, it definitely applies here. For most of us, our growth, our successes, our freedoms come at a high cost of our personal time and labor. Some people will win the lottery, but for most of us to achieve whatever it is we're trying to achieve, it takes a long, consistent grind full of twists and turns, flexible and quick changes in directions, and a honing and a mastery of something or multiple things that could take years and decades. I mean, this applies whether you're working at Home Depot or whether you're trying to be a freaking rock star. I mean, wherever you're going is going to take work. I mean, it takes planning, and it takes the ability to act and act quickly with purpose and direction, the ability to think outside of the box and find a way in when there seems to be no way in. Personally, I always say this, and I always think this, and I mean this. If there's a door to an opportunity, I'm going to find it. And if it's locked and I can't knock it down, I'm going to put my ass through a window. And if that window just happens to have iron bars on it, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to go into a lifted yellow 90s pickup truck with a big old grill on the front. And I'm going to literally drive that motherfucker right through the wall and create an opportunity from nothing. Now, that's a great analogy, guys, but nobody ever tells you how you do that. And since I'm doing this out of love and not wholly concerned about, profit or anything, I'm going to give you the real answer. And anybody of influence listening to this or by chance hearing about this will know exactly what I'm talking about and that I'm not bullshitting you. If they see this, I hope they let me know, but that combination of firmness, consistency, testing the waters, strategic thinking, decision-making, it drives it home. The whole thing literally about increasing our chances, creating our luck somehow. We create our luck by improving the things we have control over, which isn't really much at all. So you shouldn't be intimidating by the hard work involved, now should you? So we can control how hard we work, right? We talked about discipline, right? Well, come with me for a second. Imagine if success was a comet and you were an Earth, or the Earth to be exact. Use your imagination. Just imagine yourself as a planet. Anyway, look, you've seen Guardians too. Use that and keep up with me. You're a planet and a shooting star, a comet of sorts. This is your success, your dreams, your goal. That's that shooting star. Well, my planet-sized friend, you could wait to get hit by a freaking comet or whatever, and that could take 65 million years, or you could learn how to lasso cowboys and cowgirls, and you could learn how to lasso well. So now I'm not claiming to be the best buckaroo myself, and I'm not the greatest at roping a cattle, but if I imagined I had to learn, I would think that it would take a lot of practice. Ever play sports in high school? Do you remember the disappointment of failure? The same goes for band kids. You ever fuck up a show? Over time, you improved though, right? I mean, even if it was slight improvement, all of us have experience getting a little better at something. Even if it was getting a little better at fucking off, you got a little better or a lot better at that. So you can actually supercharge this process of learning and use it. If you've never faced something like this, you will have to eventually. There's no way around it. So you might as well get better at facing it. Anyway, back to you as a planet. So as a planet practicing to rope a shooting star, you're going to miss a ton. These are shooting stars and space is fucking big. I'm sure you've listened to some of the astrophysicists out there that have talked about that. Anyway, with enough tries, you learn what works and what doesn't work. And eventually you catch something. It may be small, but it's something. Not everyone becomes an Instagram celebrity. Not everyone becomes rich and famous, but there are millions and millions of people behind the scenes that you don't ever hear about that make great money, live great lives, do great things for their community, their country, the world, and come and go as they please. And you and I and all of us can be one of them if we work hard enough towards it intelligently. So just like the comets that almost hit the Earth every day that we never hear about, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And it doesn't mean that you can't have some of it. And it doesn't mean you can't share some of it. So how do you rope a shooting star? How do you get where you want to go? How do you figure out how to accomplish the objectives you've set out for yourself? Well, remember that visualization skill we talked about a few times already on this show? So I use that in conjunction with strategic thinking and decision making, as well as a pen and paper. To me, my objectives are plants, just like we talked about before. And strategic thinking and decision making, that's the vine on that plant. Those are the vines. And vines like to climb and creep and crawl in search of nutrients like sunlight and water and Brawndo, which is apparently what plants crave. Please go watch Idiocracy. So anyway, the vines represent the plans you will come up with to get you your spot on the card, your turn at bat, a chance to win. Now, make no mistake, getting a ticket to the dance doesn't guarantee you success. It doesn't even guarantee you a win, but it does at least secure you a shot at success, or at least at learning something valuable so that you can apply what you've learned later so you can eventually secure another shot at success. This is how it works. You rinse and repeat this pattern again and again and again. So the vine gets cut off and grows in a different direction. And all the while, the other vines are seeking out other pathways. This stuff gets very repetitive, and you have to be prepared to do it, over and over and over. And it's just that old adage, and I'll probably butcher it, but if you don't succeed at first, try again. I mean, guys, I hate to say it, but the old shit works. I really do want you to imagine like a creeping vine. I really like to use the plant from the Little Shop of Horrors when I can visualize this. And the vines are cheesy, like 1970s horror flick vines. So they don't look natural when they move. They look like they're on strings. So I don't know. They should probably be in a Rob Zombie stage show, not necessarily the movies, because his movies look real as fuck. But anyway, these vines, they're searching for nutrients. They're looking to creep through hallways, doorways, into windows, into cracks. I want my vines to take over entire structures until I have the thought of every possible way to get where I need to be, to set myself up to do it again and again. I want my vines to flower, and I want those flowers to act like little satellites that feed me information and keep me 10 steps ahead in whatever it is I want to be or do. When you're thinking about strategy and strategic decision making and thinking strategically in general, when you're envisioning how you would get from point A to point Z, your vines need to do the same thing. They need to have a destination and a purpose. They need to be able to regenerate. And when they hit a dead end, they need to be able to turn the corner and find another way. And when things change rapidly, they need to be able to do it again and again. They have to be like weeds, impervious to poisons and lawnmowers alike. Okay, so now that we're all strategic botanists, when we get back, we're going to talk about developing the tools to actually think and decide. Hint, I'm going to make you read again, guys. Be right back.
Running on a hamster wheel, but searching for something I can't feel. I just wanna be a lost girl and fly. Take a breath, feel my wings spread.
The American Reveille Podcast with James Lane would like to take a moment to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to tune into the show. It's because of great fans like you that we strive to deliver the best quality content one can create as fast as one can fling the pen. The American Reveille Podcast with James Lane would also like to remind you that the American Reveille Podcast with James Lane is, in fact, sponsored by James Lane. James Lane also writes, directs, records, edits, and produces this podcast. On top of that, James Lane also handles the daunting task of running the social media management, and did I mention he also manages the webpage, email lists, creates and designs the artwork, and everything else you could think of. With that being said, a good little boy never misses his opportunity to sell himself, and though James would never ask you for your money, he would like to let you know that if you absolutely love this podcast, the writing, the art, its production, anything, please do us the personal favor of liking, sharing, tweeting, texting, and talking about this podcast. James Lane is a father, a husband, a U.S. Navy veteran, and is personally committed to the success of the American Reveille Podcast. For booking inquiries, potential sponsors, volunteers, internship inquiries, feedbacks, comments, or suggestions, please email James Lane directly at podcast@AmericanReveille.com, or please visit our website at www.AmericanReveille.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
Hey guys, the American Reveille Podcast is back. I am James Lane, and I have a question for you. I want to know how you're doing during these times. I know we're going through a weird time right now, and it's rough for a lot of us. And I know that if we strive better to improve ourselves and our communities, we really will have a better chance at a better future when this all washes over in a little bit. Did this partial shutdown put anything into perspective for you? I mean, Are people in your community coming together? I want to hear about what's going on in your guys' lives. And even if you have any questions or would like to know what direction you should go in, depending upon what situation you're in, please shoot me an email, guys, at jameslane@AmericanReveille.com, or connect with me on Twitter or any other of the social media platforms we're on, or visit my website at www.americanreveille.com. So anyway, we're talking about growing strategic roots. Let's say you don't know where to get started. So we're going to get basic and we're going to then build upon that. So I mentioned earlier the power behind visualization and strategy. And I said earlier as well how strategic thinking is like a fast growing vine or series of vines on a plant. So you can't think strategically if you don't understand the basics of strategy and how to learn about it. And to me, that's really the roots of this plant we're talking about that we mentioned, earlier, and that we're still going on and on and on about. Start with a little bit of the basics of strategy so you can develop a foundation to really base and build your thoughts upon. And we should talk about an example before we get a little further into the basics. And just to put this whole crazy plant thing into perspective. So let's just say you work as a clerk at a large national company, and let's pretend that you're unionized and you have no choice but to be in the union because you are hired in an hourly position that fell under their union. So let's just call that their union umbrella. So you really thought about what you wanted and you realize that you like the company you work for and you're loyal to it, and you want to move up. So you set your sights at eventually moving into the business side of the company to become a business manager. And your peers maybe discourage your plans because your hard work makes them look bad. And, to be honest, haters going to hate. But using everything we've talked about in the last few shows, you realize that you'll have to somehow get out of the hourly union ranks and get into a salaried position on the business side of the house. This isn't rocket science, folks. Your strategic plotting is happening right now. We're going through that process. So getting back, you examine yourself. What's my experience? What level of education? What makes me unique, shiny, special? What have I done? Where am I going? What special skills do I have? And you think, well, maybe I'm pretty good at organization and I work in an office already as IT. Let's just say you're an IT guy or gal. And you look through all of the jobs the company has to offer and you see one for an executive secretary, entry level. What? A secretary? James, I thought I wanted to become a business manager. So look, bucko, this is the magic of strategy. And these are the twists and turns of the vines that I talked about. So I need you to relax and watch the magic happen. So you see that it requires an associate's or equivalent work experience, and it gets you into the office, right? The business office. So what do? You recognize that this might be a possible path. You tailor your resume, you sharpen up on Excel, you learn to brew some really good coffee, you buy some chapstick for some of the rear end kissing, and you get in deep. So not really rear end kissing, by the way. I'm not an advocate of ass kissing. It's just a joke, but you get in deep. So now you're a secretary. Well, Mr. or Mrs. Secretary, what I didn't tell you is that now the company will pay for your college, maybe, since you're on the salaried side of the house. There's a lot of things for you to look at. That might be a perk. That might be part of the strategy. Look, if you're really going to understand this, you really have to get past any thing that you might have against doing this or that. You really have to be willing to work at different things and even take jobs or take paths that you might not have considered before to really get to the ultimate goal. So, are you getting it yet, guys? You really have to understand, if you want to win at this game of life, you need to take the thought of any instant gratification and just throw it out the fucking window. Look, I'm in the business of longevity, not wishful thinking and delusions of grandeur. This isn't the lottery. If you follow this stuff, you significantly increase your chances of succeeding in anything. So if you build your social skills in the office, you talk to people, you network, feel that in your stomach, that fear before talking to an executive or someone who makes more money, good for you. Follow it. Sound familiar to something we talked about before? Over time, you naturally develop even a mentor-mentee relationship with a local leader and find out you're well equipped for a related position. I don't know what to call it. Class 1 business analyst? Look, it just requires a bachelor degree, any degree. wait a minute, you don't have a bachelor degree, but wouldn't the company pay for me to do college online? And since I already have the other qualifications in the bag and I've connected with this mentor, wouldn't it mean that I might have a much better chance of getting in? I mean, look, this is really how it works out there. This is the real world. This is how business is done in a lot of companies. I hate to say it. This is that good old boy club they talk about, or that good old gal club they talk about, where you have to be connected. Well, you have to build those connections. That's really how you get past the certain ceilings out there, you know? So, really quick, guys, I want you to dial in and remember this. You get nowhere alone. Somewhere at some point, for some reason, you will need other people to help you, either naturally or set up strategically. You will need others so just get comfortable with that fact. All of us do. There's nobody on earth that started with nothing or started at some level and got to a much better level of what they wanted to accomplish by themselves with absolutely nobody else involved. It's impossible, and it's not the truth. It's not reality. You will need these skills. You will need these mentors. You will need these networks if you're trying to get past a certain point of success. Back to this mythical club we were talking about for a second, the old boys or the old girls club or the old management club that I hear at different places I've worked. And I hope you guys imagine my invisible air quotes around this, because I know it doesn't exist everywhere, but in a lot of places I've worked, it does. And the people that complain about those people that have gotten ahead or that seem to get selected, those are usually the people bitching and moaning about how stuff's not fair and how nobody gets ahead. And they give that famous, "it takes a miracle for that to happen" speech that I've heard at 10 different places I've worked at. They like to talk about this mystical clubhouse made of men and women that seem to be, or men and women that seem to be ordained by birthright to be there. Some elite class in the place you work that we never, ever, ever can achieve or get to. But a little secret, guys, they're also out of toilet paper too. And you know what that means? That means that they're no better than you and no worse, and vice versa. Maybe some of them have more money, maybe some of them don't, but it's all achievable and it all can make sense. So back to the office. So you put the amount of time in at work that you needed, and then you put the amount of time in at school outside of work. Maybe you do it online, and you get a degree in, I don't know, fucking underwater basket weaving. And because of your reputation and your connections that you've built over the last few years, you've now got the job. So even as I say this, it feels like an eternity. The entire story feels like it's taking forever. This is on purpose, because hard work and success, the time it takes, does sometimes feel like it takes fucking forever. So try this. Zoom out. I want you to zoom out and take a look at the big picture. 3 to 4 years ago, you were a clerk. Now you're a business analyst, probably making double or triple the money. Look, 3 years ago, I was living in the Philippines, learning some hard life lessons. And now I'm hosting a podcast and writing like a banshee. Look, time moves quick. And no matter what we do, the sand is always slipping. It's always moving, grain by grain through the hourglass. And that's just to put things into perspective. You may stop, you may take a break, but the clock never stops running. So before we get a little deeper into actual strategic thinking, I want to recommend a few books that really set you up for thinking strategically. And you'll have to use your imagination to really relate to the different environments with similar concepts. So, for example, history, war, business, they all have the same basic elements and moves on the chessboard, just different results. So you study it and it sharpens you. You have to understand that there's no new strategies or moves, really. They're all just different combinations and rehashings of ones that have just been used about a bazillion times over the years. So don't let this intimidate you. Even if you don't get it yet, just read them or listen to them. I won't flood you with 100 books. I'm just going to bring maybe back up 3 basic books probably that I've mentioned here. And this podcast it's going to go in all different directions. But one thing's going to be constant. I probably will always be recommending some sort of book to you. So that's just something you're going to have to get used to. And if you actually heed my advice, it will be very, very beneficial. I promise you. So just for time's sake, these 3 books, this will change your life in many ways, especially strategically. Look, the 3 books, and again, this is what I started with and found to be the easiest to understand and digest and put into action. These were Robert Greene, The 33 Strategies of War, the memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant. I mean, they're written by Ulysses S. Grant as he was dying of throat cancer. And of course, Carnegie, that very special person that I told you about that wrote How to Win Friends and influence people back in the 1930s. And I still love saying his name like that. So anyway, if you're listening to me, then you may have heard others tout books like this. You've listened to parts of my story. You've listened to some of what I've been through. And these books worked for me. And I think they'll work for you just as they've worked for others in many different situations. They'll probably work for you if you study them, but you've got to study them well. So we start getting back to the question of how bad do you want it? Well, how bad do you want it? Whatever it is that you want, how bad can you taste it? What do you want? Can you listen to an audiobook while playing Call of Duty? Stop worrying about what you can't control and start controlling what you can control. I read these books to my infant daughter in between Moana and Elsa. Make time. So I'm not going to get into crazy detail about the books, not unless you guys want that. I've seen a lot of 3-hour book podcasts out there that were really good, and nobody cared besides maybe me and 10 other people. So unless there's really a demand for that, it's not really happening. So we have to balance what I want to do and what I love doing, and also what you guys want to hear and what's entertaining for you guys and what really is pertinent to your growth and what's valuable. So speaking of movement, guys, I'm going to be right back in about 2 minutes with some strategic thinking. We're going to go to a commercial. Be right back.
Coming in, top down, throw the money in a win. I don't want it all. Heard he scammer had to switch up the accounts.
The American Reveille Podcast with James Lane would like to take a moment to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to tune into the show. It's because of great fans like you that we strive to deliver the best quality content one can create as fast as one can fling the pen. The American Reveille Podcast with James Lane would also like to remind you that the American Reveille Podcast with James Lane is, in fact, sponsored by James Lane. James Lane also writes, directs, records, edits, and produces this podcast. On top of that, James Lane also handles the daunting task of running the social media management, and did I mention he also manages the webpage, email lists, creates and designs the artwork, and everything else you could think of. With that being said, a good little boy never misses his opportunity to sell himself, and though James would never ask you for your money, he would like to let you know that if you absolutely love this podcast, the writing, the art, its production, anything, please do us the personal favor of liking, sharing, tweeting, texting, and talking about this podcast. James Lane is a father, a husband, a U.S. Navy veteran, and is personally committed to the success of the American Reveille Podcast. For booking inquiries, potential sponsors, volunteers, internship inquiries, feedbacks, comments, or suggestions, please email James Lane directly at podcast@AmericanReveille.com, or please visit our website at www.AmericanReveille.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
That's better. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the American Reveille Podcast, and we are hot and heavy into the basics of strategic thinking, planning, and decision making for the third and final segment of the 5th episode of the American Reveille Podcast. So first and foremost, remember that everyone is different, and we've talked about this before. We all have different strengths and weaknesses and are at varying levels of growth and development in these areas. This is the cold, hard truth regarding preparedness to plan and act We are all unique and special snowflakes after all. It's actually true. We are unique in many ways. So for me, at least, I'm going to go full throttle on the Game of Thrones references here. So you know how they all eventually stand around tables and basically talk about what their scouts reported them while they scoot little figures around on a giant stone table? You know, that shit. You basically have to do that in your brain, guys. So Khaleesi the fuck up. Think about what you want to do, where you want to go, what you're trying to achieve. Be it a project, be it a small goal, be it an entire career, an entire life. You imagine what someone could do to achieve that goal. You imagine the vines growing and creeping. You imagine what you are and aren't good at, what you are and aren't capable of. And you think about the different things that could help you get where you need to be, as well as the things that could hurt your plans along the way. So you think about these things and relate them to the different pathways you come across as you plan your way towards your objectives. And I found that it helps to write out your vision for the future, or even your vision of achievement about the completion of a goal or project. And it can be even more important to know the why behind this vision than other things about it, you know, like more details. Sometimes you can pound out about details so much that you never even get started. So I found that my overall goal for this podcast, its mission, and this may help you focus on what I'm talking about here. Its mission is to start a positive movement, you know, in communities across this country and even across the world, really inspiring everyday people like you and me to change our lives and become better people so we can be more equipped to serve ourselves, our families, our communities, in improving mental health, improving the strength of this country. Just it even goes beyond that. But on the same token, the vision of how this podcast will achieve such an impossible thing is through the weekly upload of a 30-minute to 1 hour podcast, the thoughtful creation of a quality show in this spirit, which will help facilitate this awakening of ownership, innovation, and action in this country that I love so much. This positive action towards personal growth, financial independence, community. At the same time, we're going to work diligently to establish a presence on social media and on the web, you know, and I'll selfishly promote myself here at www.americanreveille.com, and people will be able to sign up to our mailing list there. There's a reason I'm telling you this. It's not to promote. What I'm telling you is that there's a mission and a vision behind this podcast. It's a project in my life that I want to share with everybody here, and you guys can have your own projects that you can share with other people as well. So I don't know if you guys are starting to see the things unfold here that I'm talking about. And I'm sure a lot of you are. I don't know if everybody is, but I told you I was going to tell you everything and be transparent. And I'm going to offer you this value by telling you everything. And I mean, if I'm meant to make money, then the money will come. And for now, I'm just going to keep writing and doing this show because I love it. I'm enjoying it. I'm having fun. And that's something you need to take into consideration when you're thinking about where you're trying to go and how you're trying to get there. Is it for love? Is it for money? Is it for both? Why? Why are you doing it? That is vastly important to achieving your goals. So when you find something that when you do it, you love the process of it, the work itself, regardless of the results, regardless of failure, you just do it, you love it, you should cling to it for a while and drive forward. It may be in your blood. You may learn some stuff. You may find your calling. It may fall all apart, just like it did for me 100 times. But you'll have to pick yourself up. So listen, it's plain and simple. Study some books, do some deep thinking, write some shit down, try it out, fuck it up and fail at it. Maybe don't fail at it, possibly fail at it a bunch. Either way, you change the strategies around and you keep going. You learn and you stay in the game longer each time until you finally succeed. You stay firm, you think deep, and you drive forward. So anyway, guys, I know you got something great out of this, and I got something wonderful out of it too. And it was a blast to hang out with y'all tonight. This one was a fun one to write and to be a part of. And I really, really want you guys to please send in your feedback. I want your criticism. I want you to tell me how much I suck so I can get better. The more you tell me what's up, the more I can improve. The more I improve, the better content I put out for you guys, and your experience will be much more enjoyable, and my experience will be enjoyable. Even more enjoyable. So until next time, folks, I need to ask you guys one last time. How bad do you really want it? How bad do you really want to achieve your goals? I'm not charging you guys for this. There's nothing on my website making you pay for this information. There are other people out there that have that, but you won't find it from me. This is the real shit. So next time we're going to talk all about time management. Again, how bad do you really want it? So until next time, stay firm, my friends. I'm clocking the fuck out.